Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My apologies for this. I need a comb for my beard with the masks. Good morning. Welcome to the second day of the United Nations Biodiversity Conference, COP15, COP-MOP4, COP-MOP10. My name is David Ainsworth. I'm the head of communications at the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Let me give you the press briefing for today with activities from yesterday and going on. And for the interpreters who are online, I will attempt to speak more slowly and provide some notes to you. Let me first provide a report of what happened in Working Group 1 yesterday. So in terms of the main outcomes, all 16 items of the COP15 agenda that were under the responsibility of Working Group 1 were considered, and an agreement was reached on the way forward for each of the agenda items. The plenary, in fact, was adjourned earlier at 5:05 rather than 6 p.m. The approach that was taken for considering Working Group 1 items followed with a new proposed organization of work. So for the items where there were only a few unresolved issues, it was proposed to directly prepare conference room papers with some informal consultations with relevant parties when necessary. For the items that had many or complex unresolved issues, indicated by the presence of square brackets, the proposition was to immediately establish a contact group with a view to preparing a consensus text that would be moved forward to transmitted to the working group as a CRP. No objection was raised on this proposed way forward, and so therefore contact group were established for the evening, first of all on agenda item 12A, resource mobilization, and then also on agenda item 14, planning, monitoring, reporting, and review. The contact group today will do the following activities. So first of all, in the morning, the working group will not meet, but only contact groups will meet. We will have a contact group on digital sequence information, or DSI, which is item 11. In the afternoon, there will be a contact group on the Global Biodiversity Framework itself, item number 9, and a contact group on capacity building, which is item 13A. In the evening, the working group will look at a contact group on the Global Biodiversity Framework again, so that same contact group will meet twice, and the contact group on resource mobilization will also meet as well. This is not in the notes for the interpreters, but it was noted in the Bureau meeting today that many hours will be required to address the Global Biodiversity Framework. So we should all expect that over the course of this meeting, the contact groups for the Global Biodiversity Framework will many hours of the meeting times. Let me now turn to working group number 2. Working group number 2 held its first session yesterday in the afternoon from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. The chair, Ms. Helena Jeffrey Brown from Antigua and Barbuda, opened the session and she took up the following items. They took up the item under the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety, item 8 on monitoring and reporting. They also took up the item under the Nagoya Protocol on monitoring and reporting as well. So monitoring and reporting on both of these protocols. There was a first reading and the chair will be preparing a conference room paper or a CRP for consideration. Then the group turned to, again, the Cartagena Protocol, the question of assessment and review. That item was considered by the subsidiary body in implementation earlier this year, but there were a large number of brackets. And therefore, the chair is working on preparing a CRP with the Secretariat. And there'll also be some guidance to the Global Environment Facility that'll be moved over to discussions on the financial mechanism. Then the group turned to an item again under the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety on the biosafety clearinghouse. There was a first full reading and it looks like the chair will prepare a conference room paper as well. They then turned to the question of the access and benefit sharing clearinghouse, ABS clearinghouse, under the Nagoya Protocol. And that was first full reading and it looks like they can move forward to a CRP. Just a note, both of these clearinghouses for the Cartagena Protocol and for the Nagoya Protocol are very important instruments to monitor compliance and give parties the opportunity to work and move forward. We also had then a discussion on risk assessment under the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety. That item was considered earlier this year by the subsidiary body on science, technology, and technological assessment, but it has brackets. So a contact group was established to deal with this question of risk assessment, and this is going to be chaired by Takzeni Chidada from South Africa, and Werner Schenkel from Germany. So just letting you know that risk assessment is indeed the central piece of the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety, and therefore that explains the reasons why this is an intense discussion. After that, the working group moved to a COP item on synthetic biology. Again, this item was considered by the subsidiary body of Science, Technology, and Technological Assessment, but again, it's really quite a large issue. The contact group has also been established, chaired by the same people, Takzeni Chikdada. I'm going to keep practicing it, Takzeni, until I get your name right, and Werner Schenkel. The mandate, again, is to resolve the text in brackets. I have here 3 more items. Goodness, this working group did a lot of work yesterday. They also covered item 20A on marine and coastal biodiversity. And this is the question of EBSAs, EBSAs, or areas that are ecologically or biologically significant in areas beyond national jurisdiction. Again, this item has been considered by all meetings of the SBSTA, both SBSTA 23 and 24 over the last few years, but it is not clean text. So they need to get a contact group resolve these issues. This group will be co-chaired by Marie-May Jérémy of the Seychelles and René Sauvé. I don't have the country for René Sauvé, so sorry, René, I'll have to come up with that. You'll work on the basis of a non-paper that was prepared. And again, this question of these areas, these EBSAs, is very important. It's noted that in some of these EBSAs around the world, this is where we see some of the most high levels of biodiversity in the high seas. Because they're in the high seas, the question of how to resolve or deal with them is very important. And then finally, they looked at an item under the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety on detection and identification of living modified organisms, LMOs. And there's a CRP prepared for that. So the group actually, it's curious, notwithstanding all these items they actually moved ahead on the agenda, and they're able to consider items that were supposed to be dealt with today. They looked at an item under the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety on the implementation plan and capacity building action plan. And again, this was considered by the subsidiary body, but there are brackets. And so another another contact group was established. Rita Andorko of Hungary and Rigoberto Ntep from Cameroon is looking at this as well. There was a look at the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety, dealing with the supplementary protocol, the Nagoya Kuala Lumpur supplementary protocol as well. And this is a protocol that deals with redress for issues relating to violations under it. So they're looking at a first full reading. They can prepare a conference room paper. And then finally, this hard-working group moved forward on an item under the Nagoya Protocol on measures to assist in capacity building and capacity development. They considered looks like they considered text that was dealt with by SBI and new text, but it appears like insertions that were there were deleted, and it looks like they're preparing a CRP. So they moved forward as well. So that's great. Contact groups that were set up under the working group. First of all, last night, they had an item of risk assessment under the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety that met last night, and we'll look at results from there. Today, the plan is to have 2 contact groups. The contact group on synthetic biology under the Convention on Biological Diversity will meet tonight at 7:30 p.m. And then a contact group on the EBSAs will be meeting tonight at 7:30 p.m. as well. And we have other items that will take place in other days. I do want to remind the media with regard to what you can cover as far as photography, filming, and indeed also presence in the rooms. Unfortunately, you are not permitted to go into the contact group rooms. So you will have to do any discussions with delegates in the hallways on this basis. Please don't. And even for those who are doing photography or videos, do not place your camera in the doors and attempt to take pictures. That will cause some consternation on the part of the delegates. Let me list a few other events that are important to come up for today. Let's see. So I've actually indicated what's on the go for today. So the working groups as we've indicated. So first of all, the working group 1 this morning will start at 10 o'clock with a discussion on the mainstreaming agenda. So that's CBD-16 mainstreaming. Mainstreaming is a very important part of the work under the convention. It's a way that we can ensure that biodiversity considerations are extended beyond typical areas. So mainstreaming refers in this case to specific targeted sectors. Agriculture is one, forestry is another, fisheries, the health sector, infrastructure, mining, etc. And this is a way to ensure we get biodiversity considerations. Working group number 2 will this morning move to some items, as we've said, capacity building under the Cartagena Protocol, resource mobilization under the Cartagena Protocol, and also resource mobilization under the Nagoya Protocol, and then the Nagoya Kuala Lumpur Supplementary Protocol. Working Group 1 will not meet this afternoon, but Working Group 2 has a huge agenda ahead of it. I'll give this whole list, but these are groups that you can attend. Working Group 2 will look at the program of work of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBES. Remember that IPBES does receive instructions from the parties to the convention on what their research program should be. We will also have a discussion this afternoon on protected areas in Working Group 2. Protected areas is an important cornerstone of the conservation agenda of the convention. We will also have a discussion in the working group on invasive alien species. We will have a discussion on sustainable wildlife management. This is a very important agenda under the convention, and indeed there's also the Collaborative Partnership in Wildlife that does work across agencies on sustainable wildlife management. The group will also address the issues of climate change and biodiversity this afternoon. They will address the question of agriculture. There's a large paper worked on that. They will discuss the question of health and biodiversity. So with regard to health, there is this idea of trying to explore what is called the One Health approach. The One Health approach brings together human health, animal health, and ecosystem health in an attempt to come up with integrated policy that deals with all of these things. And there are 2 more items for working group. They will look at the question of nature and culture. And then finally, they'll be looking at the overall program of work of the convention in the medium term. Today is the first day that we see a number of the big parallel events taking place here at the convention. So first of all, in the CEPA Fair. CEPA Fair stands for Communication, Education, and Public Awareness. This event starts. We have a series of events starting on the hour, on the day. At 11 o'clock, we'll have an event by a group called On the Edge that looks at communication for conservation. At noon, the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity will talk about in traditional knowledge and communication. At 1 p.m., the group Women for Biodiversity will look at communicating gender considerations on biodiversity. At 2 p.m., the Commission on Education and Communication of IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, will talk about the work that they are doing. And they have done a great deal of work in terms of behavioral change and in terms of work related to the love of nature. At 3 p.m., the Indigenous Women's Biodiversity Network will also talk about the intersection of gender and traditional knowledge. At 4 p.m., the Canadian Association of Science Centres will give a presentation on their work of communicating biodiversity to the public. At 5 p.m., the Athabasca Chippewayan First Nation and the Mikisew Cree First Nation will give a presentation on their work to present and move forward on communication. And then finally at 6 p.m., there's an event by the International Land Coalition. Today, we also have a beginning of Place Québec. So Place Québec is an important initiative supported by the government of Québec. Merci bien, gouvernement du Québec, pour donner votre appui à cette
Thank you to the government of Quebec for their support.
Throughout the conference, events about the role of non-state actors in the support of the convention. Place Québec has an auditorium, and today in the auditorium agenda, we will have the entire day devoted towards youth. It's a discussion space on the role of youth as right holders. There will be an intergenerational dialogue. There will be a panel discussion on the role of French-speaking youth in biodiversity protection and also building with youth-led funding partnerships. You know that they've got this initiative where they're promoting a dance. Well, Elizabeth Maruma Mrema will come and dance with youth at 10:45. It's a great opportunity. Elizabeth's a good dancer. You wanna see that. And then the CBD Alliance will also be presenting later on. Place Quebec also has something called the Hub Space, where they're seeing a bunch of smaller presentations. And under the Hub Space today, the focus is on biodiversity and finance. That'll be taking place there. We'll have questions of biodiversity credits, risks and opportunities, data tools will also be looked at, etc. I have many events here, and I'm realizing I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to present all of them, but I would encourage you to go to the website to look at Place Quebec, so we'll see that. Also noting at Place Quebec in the hub, we will also have presentations on Indigenous peoples and local communities taking place, and these events are led by people like the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, TEBA, the question of the Nation Wampi and Niatero. So take a look at that. And then finally, I do want to let you know that throughout the day, the Women's Caucus will be presenting briefs for COP15. So they'll give you presentations on the implications of gender for all these different items as well. So my apologies that I can't list all of them, but there are just so many going forward. But that's Place Quebec, and I invite people to go over to the space over there. One last thing is there are press conferences booked here today. I think I got the last ones in my email. Press conferences for today. After we're finished our briefing here, the National Geographic Society and the Campaign for Nature will be presenting a press conference on understanding the 30 by 30 goal, what to expect from the negotiations. Following that at 10:30, we have the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities, who will be addressing the implications of efforts to weaken sections of the EU deforestation legislation. We then have WWF doing their daily briefing at 11 o'clock. WWF will try to deliver a briefing every day at 11 o'clock. We'll talk about what's on the go. At noon, we have the Swede Bio and the Stockholm Resilience Center. We'll be presenting a conference looking at the Working Group on Human Rights and Biodiversity, an important part of the new agenda. And then the final conference, actually, that's the only one I have booked for right now. So we'll take a look. But those will be here, media in the room. You'll be called to it, and media online, please look at those. Now, I'm expecting a colleague from Canada to come and join me and give a presentation. Come on up. She's been very polite standing on the side there. She'll give a bit of a briefing of some of the events Canada's focusing, and then I'll turn to some questions online. Good morning. Bonjour, comment ça va? Très bien, excellent.
Good morning, how are you? Sit down, please. Wonderful. Okay. Good morning, I'm Gabriel. I work in environment and climate change in Canada, public sector. So today I'm going to start in French and then I will repeat in English after that. So we are going to start with the Canadian Pavilion. The Canadian Pavilion, their theme today is protected areas. In the pavilion, we're going to have a number of events organized by Indigenous women living in Canada. The government from the Northwest government and the conservation of bats. Then we'll have an announcement of at 1:30 with Minister Guilbeault regarding cities, friends of birds at 2 o'clock. After the statement, we're inviting media with Minister Guilbeault to answer, to take your questions. So this is going to be organized outside the pavilion, the Canadian Pavilion. You're welcome to join in. And then we have the SNAP event regarding the dialogue and the solutions regarding the underlying causes to the loss of biodiversity. It's going to be a round table, and we're inviting media at 18:45, and Mr. Guilbeault will take the floor regarding this debate with CPAWS to discuss all the solutions that could be found and the different discussions regarding the underlying reasons to the loss of biodiversity. I'm speaking too fast, most probably. I apologize. Biodiversity, I can't pronounce it properly. So that's it. And then to remind you that the Canadian government is publishing the most important parts of the day and a summary of the day and what's going to happen tomorrow. It's being published each day at 8 p.m. And if you do not receive this, come to me after the end of the presentation. I will add your name to the list. You will have all the activities of Mr. Guilbeault with the daily station with COP15 and the photo of the day to complement all this CBD.
And now in English. Good morning. So today is Protected Area Days at the Canadian Pavilion. We will have an event organized by ECCC, Indigenous Leadership Initiative, Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society, CPAS, and consult of Innu de Pessamit and the Office of the Ambassador for Climate Change of Canada. We will also have an announcement for Bird Cities at 1:30 with Minister Guilbeault. We invite all media at 2 p.m. at the Canadian Pavilion for a media availability on with Minister Guilbeault for a scrum style just outside in front of the Canadian Pavilion. We will also have tonight at 6:15 to 7:45 an event with a table ronde, so a roundtable discussion organized by SNAP Quebec concerning all solutions for the loss of biodiversity. This discussion will also be a debate, and it will be assisted with Minister Guilbeault. Minister Guilbeault will provide remarks at around 6:45. It is open to the public and open to the media, and it's in the plenary room upstairs, if I'm not mistaken.
Does it say so?
Mm-hmm. Plenary room. We also send, ECCC Media Relations team also send every night around 8 p.m. a summary with the quote of the day from Minister Guilbeault and also a quote from whomever within COP15 negotiation and events. We also add everything that happens throughout that day and everything that we should look ahead for the next day. If ever you are not in our distribution list, please come see me after this presentation and I will make sure that you are part of our mailing list. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. For SNAP, is that Alain Branchot is the name of the person behind that? Yeah, Alain, no, I had a chance to meet him. Alain actually produced, in partnership, a number of beer that was supposed to be raising funds to support biodiversity years ago. It was quite fascinating. It was good. Let me take questions from the floor. I don't see any questions yet online, but let me take any questions from the floor. Let's get microphones to the people. And when you ask your question, please introduce who you are, because some of you I know very well, but some of you, and I've also taken my glasses off, so I may not see you very well.
Hi. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
So I'm Stella Fall from IPS News and Art Journalism Network. The question is for David.
Sure.
David, so to be clear, how many new contact groups do we have? What's their mandate and how often are the meeting? And how often we will know the progress as well? Thank you.
So the number of contact groups, I know I should have memorized how many I announced just here, but I don't remember it. I think I will just announce that we will have contact groups running no more than 2 at a time, but it's clear that we have contact groups announced. I mean, if I'll go through my list here, it seems to me we do have potentially about a dozen different contact groups that are meeting right now. Let me go through my list that I've got. So we have a Friends of the Chair on the Global Biodiversity Framework announced, that's one. We have a contact group on technical and scientific cooperation knowledge management. We have a contact group on digital sequence information, a contact group on resource mobilization, a contact group on synthetic biology, a contact group on marine biodiversity, that's 6. That's what we've got right now, just 6 announced right now, and probably more. So with regard to the contact groups, I will endeavor to provide an update in the mornings to what I can. But do note that the contact negotiations are fairly delicate, so I can't tell you who said what and what the reaction was from one country to another, but I will try endeavor to look at that. You'll have to take a look at the screens and know how things are going. I think the most significant thing to note is that the contact group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will meet often, possibly every day. Sorry, there is one more contact group that I did not mention that starts this morning. It's the contact group on the budget, so that will determine my future, the Secretariat's future, everybody's future right there. So I'll be going here. But we will keep you briefed all the time in these groups. Thanks, Stella.
Thank you. Tetsuji Ida from Kyoto News. Very nice to see you. Can you tell me who will chair the contact group of DSI and Global Framework?
Contact group on DSI.
DSI and also the global framework.
And the global framework. Well,
Yeah.
the global framework group is chaired by Basil Van Havre of Canada and Francis Ogwald, people who are the co-chairs of the open-ended working group. So they're running the whole process. For DSI, let me just double check. Did I indicate here? That's a working group too. I just want to double check who we had here. I may have to go to my notes from yesterday in terms of this. The contact group on DSI. My goodness, I'm going to have to go back to my notes here, so I'll because I don't have that. These are the notes from yesterday, and because I'm a 54-year-old man, the things I don't have in my head, I don't remember from immediately. But it is indeed. Let me just see what the other one is. Could I take another question while I look? I'll try to multitask and pull it up. Thanks very much.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Juan Mayorga from Mexico for Sin Embargo and Reportes al Día, also with the Art Journalism Network. I was wondering if there is any approximate to the number of brackets that are still in the text. As far as we learned yesterday, it was over 1,800. It's just more or less to have an idea of how the progress is going.
Yeah, so the metric of looking at the number of brackets as a measurement of progress, it sort of measures things, but not entirely. What I can say is that, yes, the text that came from the Nairobi meeting was around 1,800 brackets. After the governments met in Montreal at the end of September at the informal meeting, they reduced the number of brackets to around 900 at that point in time. I will recall for everyone that when the open-ended working group met in the 3 days before COP, they considered these two texts in parallel. So they took the 1,800 brackets from Nairobi, the 900 brackets from Montreal, and considered them side by side. The text that we have now, and I think the link was shared with you. If it's not, I'll have it sent again. I think that number is between the two. So there are slightly more brackets than informal advisory text, but not as many as before. I think what's important to note as far as progress, that the working group managed to get clean text on targets 20 and 21, as in the thing. In addition to, remember, target 12 was also clean before, but the other ones remain with a lot of brackets. And I think it is safe to say that the parties have a great deal of work ahead of them. In the Bureau meeting, I won't tell you the number of hours that it was recommended they required, but it's a long time. It's a double-digit figure in terms of the number of hours they will require to resolve these issues. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Shakur Rathar. I am from Press Trust of India, New Delhi. So my question is about the pre-COP sessions that happened. What was what is the advancement as far as the 30 by 30 rule is concerned by now?
So the pre-COP discussions are, as I said, the meeting of the open-ended working group that took place between 3 and 5 December. Delegates did also discuss the target that related to protected areas, and there still is unresolved text on it. Just to recall to the members of the press here, so the target regard to protected areas has many elements. One element is indeed the question of protecting a certain percentage of the terrestrial and sea areas, and that's with this idea that 30% is an expected target by the year 3030, hence the 30 by 30. But there are other elements to be considered also. The target also asks or recommended that, that the areas are representative of all the different biomes on the planet, that they are effective and protect the species that need to be protected, that they are well funded. And indeed, there's also the question that these areas respect the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities on the area. So those are questions that are all still under discussion, and the text is in brackets as well. Thanks. Let me see if there are questions online, and I've still got to try to find the names of the chairs for DSI for you, pardon me. Okay, I see, well, no, I'll give you the answer in just a few minutes here. Yeah, don't ask me tomorrow. I've forgotten what happened 2 days ago. I have a question on Interactio from ESG Clarity. Are events in Place Quebec available virtually? This is Natasha from ESG Clarity in that case. Yeah, we'll have a number of those events available virtually. They will be streamed in these cases, all events that we can. The Place Quebec is a very important setting, so you'll see those certainly on the YouTube channel, but also if you are connected virtually, you'll be able to look at that as well. We have a question in the back there as well. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Kelisha Williams from Television Jamaica. I just want to find out, do you have anyone from the Caribbean who will be chairing any of the contact groups?
From the Caribbean, I mean, the contact groups that I announced today, let me just double check. Today I didn't announce, but I know we had the representative from Antigua and Barbuda who's leading the working group on this one. But the contact groups that we announced today, don't know if I've got. Yeah, the ones today, no, I don't have any that were announced for the course of today. Because I said I announced Cameroon today, I announced the Seychelles, etc. on that one here. So I think actually, representative of the meeting, what I'll do, and I really apologize, I should have this at my fingertips. I will work with the team and then I will broadcast to the entire list a summary of who's leading all the different contact groups for your consideration. And I want to apologize to everybody. I should have this right here, but I don't have it today. But I will send that over in the next half an hour or so. Any other questions? Oh, I see 2 hands up.
Hi, I'm Antje Passenheim, German Broadcasting ARD. Could you explain, just simply to understand the whole working process, could you explain just briefly what is the working groups, what are they working on, and what is the task for the contact groups? How does it work so we can explain it to our audience also?
Yeah, certainly understood. Yeah, this process might be a little bit opaque for everyone. So the way that the meeting unfolds is that the overall agenda of how we deal with it, so the subjects that are dealt with, the specific papers, that's determined in advance, and the opening plenary that was held yesterday looked at that overall agenda and organization of work and ratified and agreed to move forward. So the plenary is where all parties meet together, and that's where any final decisions by the Convention on Biological Diversity are taken. All governments in that spot make the decisions. To facilitate the work, because we need to work fairly quickly, they create 2 working groups that work side by side. The working groups divide the agenda items for the convention and for its 2 protocols, and they look at them according to a prioritization that the governments agreed on in the plenary session. Those groups will look at the documents, which represent the draft decisions, the draft ways we will move forward. If those decisions and the text of those decisions bring about consensus, which means that there are no strong objections to any parts of the text, then those texts are considered ready to be adopted at the end of the meeting, the last day of the meeting. Although I'll qualify, as I think there are potential plans to have an interim plenary to gavel some of those decisions at the beginning of the second week. So that's what happens. Now, in the event that some of these texts have issues for which there is not an agreement, there's a lack of consensus, then the working group and the chairs of the working group agree to create contact groups or friends of the chair. Both of these are small negotiating groups that meet in camera, which is to say that they're not public events. They're limited to the parties there and a certain established observer organizations. And those discussions is where they look at the text very closely. That's where they'll open the document, probably on the screen, and they'll begin to negotiate the movement of text, the movement of commas and semicolons, etc., punctuation, to move things forward. Once there's work in those contact groups and there's an agreement, then the text from there is then brought back to the working group to see if it can be considered for more areas in this case. The contact groups and Friends of the Chair are smaller, but for something like the Global Biodiversity Framework contact group, because it deals with, it's something that's of concern to all the parties, it will in fact be quite a large meeting in that case, in that way. So those discussions continue and contact groups meet and discuss until they come to some sort of consensus. If it's the case that the group works for days and doesn't have consensus, it comes back to the working group and governments investigate how they can reorganize the work or move forward on other parts. Discussions happen bilaterally. Discussions happen in regional groups of moving forward on these different issues. And so if you want the public to understand, it's, what can we agree on in the large setting? What can we do in the smaller settings? And then we keep working through until we have consensus. And many of these contact groups will be meeting very late into the night. And like I said, for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, we're looking at dozens upon dozens upon dozens of hours of work for that. I hope that helps. Thanks. We got a couple more. Goodness, it's a big day. We're actually running over time. Well, I'll keep going for a bit more. 5 minutes more.
Thanks, Phoebe Weston from The Guardian. Just wanted to clarify something you just said about some of the targets may be agreed early next week if they've got no brackets on them, or
Okay, no, sorry. With regard to the Global Biodiversity Framework, thank
Yeah.
you for asking for that clarification, Phoebe. No, with regard to anything, the Global Biodiversity Framework, it has to be agreed as a whole. But what I've indicated is that the text for Target 12, Targets 20 and 21 under the framework, there are no brackets in it right now. So the governments for those targets appear to have reached a consensus. But the Global Biodiversity Framework must be agreed as a whole. So those will not be gavelled until the end. What I was speaking of is some of the other agenda items for the COP or the COP MOPs of the protocols. If those are agreement, then those will be gavelled and agreed in advance, just so we can save more time for those things. But no, the Global Biodiversity Framework, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. That's the phrase we like to use in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Daniela Chiaretti from São Paulo, Valor Econômico. Two questions, if I may. One is about the war in Ukraine. Do you see tensions here in the discussions, in the debate? And the second thing is DSI. DSI is a debate that is a discussion, negotiation on parallel of the global framework. And there are some proposals on mechanisms for financing DSI, and one of them is from the African group. So I don't know if you can give us some details on that.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks very much, Daniela, for your questions. So with regard to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, I believe there have been some statements made over the course of the year by the parties involved in it, but I can't comment on those. Those are statements the parties have made. You can see them in the records of previous meetings and things here. You know, the understanding is that everyone comes here in the spirit of multilateralism and cooperation. And so while statements may be made, the negotiations continue. You'll note that all parties involved in the conflict in the Ukraine are indeed participating in the meeting in a full fashion. With regard to DSI, you are correct in the sense that there's the Global Biodiversity Framework, but there's also a parallel negotiation on the question of digital sequence information. And so there is a contact group, as we said, and I've got to get the names for our colleagues here, but who's running and managing that specific contact group as well. I'm afraid I'm at a loss. I don't see the African position. I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on that specifically. And in fact, during these meetings, it'll be very hard for me to comment specifically on country positions as the Secretariat represents all organizations. So in that case, you'll want to reach out to the African group, and I can help facilitate those contacts if you need it. So sorry I'm not more helpful, Daniela. Any more? Because I got 2 minutes before, because we have to clear the stage for the next group.
Hi, I'm Diwakar from Online Cover Nepal. So my question is, how much are you hopeful about the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework by the end, or so can we expect to go the meeting longer by the end date? So to be more precise, will the meeting end on December 19 as agreed, or do we need to plan some extra days? Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Well, in terms of, my expectations of it, I can certainly only cite the words of our Executive Secretary, Elizabeth Maruma-Mrema, the words of Inger Anderson, and the words of the Secretary General himself, is that it is imperative that this meeting comes out with an ambitious, realistic and transformative post-2020 global biodiversity framework to advance the work of the convention as well. So that's our expectations and our hopes for it. With regards to negotiating times, there are provisions for some extra negotiations, which would be unusual for the convention process. We are unlike the climate change process that regularly goes 48 to 72 hours beyond the area there. I don't think that's a way we want to compete with them, to be honest. But I think there are provisions for some extra time. But Christmas is coming up, and the Palais de Congrès has to be given to other people somewhere along the line. So I'm going to have to bring it to a close because we have to prepare the stage for others. But as I said, I'll make sure I provide the link to all of the co-chairs for the contact groups. And thank you very much from our colleague from Canada for joining us this morning too. We'll see you again tomorrow. Okay, thanks very much,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Merci.